boundaries. I'm back. Welcome to Lyte Talks. My name is Nikema Lyte, licensed clinical social worker, and I am super excited to be with you today. I have been having such an amazing time in this journey on teaching, sharing, and living with healthy boundaries. Today, I'm going to be talking about people pleasing, okay? So this is the third video of the segment. If you have not watched the first two, make sure that you go check those out, like and share those with someone, because today we're going to be hitting the big shebang, the finale of people pleasing and navigating that space. I mean, we all know people pleasing is an issue or problem, yet so many of us fall prey to it, right? So I'm going to be talking about 3 areas today: exposing the consequences of people pleasing, looking at what the root cause of people pleasing is, and saying no. You guessed it. Make sure you watch to the end. Good morning! Good morning! Okay. People pleasing is an emotional need to please others at the expense of one's own desires or needs. So being able to think of people pleasing as not just wanting to serve or love on others, but the cost of not attending to our emotional and mental and relational needs. So let's explore the consequences. You might know some. Make sure you comment down below if there's some consequences you've experienced personally from people pleasing. But first I want to look at the vulnerability of being open in relationships where people use us. When we become people pleasers or people that often serve, give access to, in your resources, time, gifts, talents, don't say no, we become a target. People know that we're people pleasers. So if they need something done, if they need a yes, they're gonna come to the yes man. And that puts us at a level of vulnerability, which leads to another consequence, which is unfulfilled commitments. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're a people pleaser and you've said yes to 5 commitments on a Saturday, I highly doubt you'll be able to actually fulfill each commitment that you have granted that access to. Well, what happens as a result is we don't show up in the spaces we've given our word. And then people can say, hey, you're a flop, or you're not consistent. And that can kind of stir something up in us to make us prove a point, say yes again, in order to continue this cycle. So it's important for us to understand that if we've said yes to some things, we have to say no to other things in order for us to have all our commitments actually fulfilled, which leads to another consequence, which can be feelings of resentment and anger. Now, let's get serious for a moment. We have feelings. And we don't necessarily attempt to fix our feelings, but feelings of resentment and anger can be really difficult to deal with. And the truth is that these feelings can not only be towards others, we can have feelings of resentment and anger towards ourselves as a consequence of being a people pleaser. Have you ever asked yourself, man, why do I keep giving access or giving people my yes when I really didn't want to? I honestly wanted to ignore the phone call, or I honestly wanted to stay home instead of going to the engagement. Well, those feelings can be mitigated when we have clearer boundaries and we allow our no to be no and our yes to be yes. You know, it leads to so many other things, as you can imagine: burnout because we're all over the place doing too much, so many other things. But I want us to be able to look at one more, which is disobedience to God. What do I mean by that? Well, I want to read this scripture from Galatians chapter 1, verse 10. Obviously, I'm not trying to win the approval of people, but of God. If pleasing people were my goal, I would not be Christ's servant. And those are some powerful words from the New Living Translation that talk about the straight opposition of pleasing God and pleasing people. The reality is, most times we can't do both at the same time. And if our heart's motivation is to be a pursuer of God's heart, that means that sometimes people won't be pleased with us. And us deciding to be more concerned with people pleasing puts us in the place of disobedience to God or being outside His will. So we'll talk more about that and that text, but I want you to hold on to that because I want us to get into the root issue. Why are we operating as people pleasers? People pleasing is just the fruit of a deeper root issue. Now, let's look at this simple math formula that I made up where no equals mean and yes equals love. Oftentimes, people pleasers think like this or have this perspective, which means if I say no, if I don't give access, if I have a disagreeing opinion, that's seen as mean. That's seen as unpleasant. That's seen as not Christian-like. But if I say yes, if I give access, if I'm always there, if I always agree, that means that I'm being loving, that I'm being caring, that I'm being a good friend or support. Well, we know by the things that we consider us experiencing in life that this is just not true. There's a lot of yes and agreements that we can make that are honestly not loving. And there's a lot of no's that I've experienced in my life that have been straight from love. So we have to be able to look at divorcing that perspective and understanding no could mean love. Yes could mean lack of love. But these roots go deep, right? When we consider how we've been shaped within our family, our life experiences, gender roles, there's so many different things that condition us to believe that being people-pleasing or appearing pleasing to people is something we should pursue. And it's honestly the reason why we're operating out of that space. So it's important for us to take some inventory, take a step back, think about, well, where did I get this perspective from? Where did I get this way of living from or making decisions or showing up in relationships from? And is this what God desires for me? Because if I were to be able to say, yes, I've been shaped to be a people pleaser all my life, so I will be a people pleaser all my life, that's not really putting power to the glory of God and His ability to transform us emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. And another root issue is poor boundaries. Yeah, I said it. If you look at my previous video, you will see a segment where I talk about what healthy boundaries look like. And if you would put that alongside someone that's operating as a people pleaser, we can see that those boundaries, those access lines, those invisible boundary line are often being crossed by people because it's not being communicated or even established for someone that's a people pleaser, which can be a root of why we're continuing in that cycle. But I want to share two more, because the fear of confrontation is something that I often hear coming from people that struggle in this area. I don't want them to be mad with me. I don't want to rock the boat. And it comes from this idea that I don't want negative emotions on the receiving end from those who I love, care about, or even don't care about. Honestly, sometimes we'll do it even with strangers. The fear to confront, the fear to speak up, the fear to create tension can be very scary, and that's valid. But at the same time, for us to be able to operate in relational intelligence and having healthy boundaries, sometimes we have to confront some things. I don't know if that's been hard for you. Comment down below if you need some steps or support around confrontation, because I would love to talk about that. Last root issue that I want to share today is the reality that a people pleaser can also be a manipulator. Don't believe me? Well, consider this. Sometimes we are people pleasing or appearing pleasing to others, doing and being there and giving access in order to gain something in return. Now, the reality is it doesn't need to be something tangible, right? Someone paying us or whatever, but we're receiving validation or approval or some type of acknowledgement that we're seeking from people. And sometimes operating as a people pleaser, we're getting this benefit in return. And this is something that's very important because it can be unconscious and it can hinder our ability to have healthy boundaries. Now let's look at saying no. In my previous video, when I talk about healthy boundaries, I acknowledge that saying no is evidence of having healthy boundaries. Being able to say yes is healthy as well, but being able to say no is healthy. And oftentimes, we're scared to say no. What's gonna happen? How are people going to look at me or think of me? And we need to be able to be divorced from public opinion. Okay? Public opinion will always be there, but the impact that it has on us, it's what's hindering us from being able to say no. So divorcing the perspective as well that people pleasing is helpful. People pleasing is beneficial. No, I'm breaking up with that idea. It's not a good one, and it's not even true or valid. Yeah, I just broke up with it. Sometimes it comes back into my life, and I have to talk to it again and be able to say, this is not helpful. This is not healthy. Saying no can be difficult if I've been giving access to people all my life. But start with, I'll get back to you. You don't have to answer to everything right away. Someone else's urgency is not your emergency. That's one statement that I use so heavily for me to be able to give myself a breather to check my motive with my yes. Am I doing this to please someone else, or am I doing this to please God? Let's look at Galatians 1 verse 10 one more time. I'm going to check this out in the Amplified version because I really want us to take hold of the message. Am I now trying to win the favor and approval of men or of God? Or am I seeking to please someone? If I was still trying to be popular with men, I would not be a bondservant of Christ. We have to choose. Sometimes we're put in the position where we're deciding to please people or God. And honestly, my decision is to please God over people. I don't want you to lose yourself in relationships. Having healthy boundaries really keeps the quality of our lives at an all-time high. But you don't have to take my word for it. Try it out. Consider what ways you want to show up in your relationships. I love you so much. Thanks for watching, friends, and go forth and shine your light.